Hello, my name is Cheryll Miller from Sense of Whimsy. Thank you for joining me today for my video tutorial in the Creating Kindness blog and video hop. Links to the other design team members' videos are included in the description below, so grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy a feast of creativity. Today I'll be using the Oh So Eclectic stamp set from Stampin' Up, in particular this little open flower. I've also stamped a little diagram of how the flowers will sit on my panel because I will be masking. I've created 4 masks from post-it note material. This one is sticky over the whole back, which is great. I'll be using some watercolour paper, 13 centimetres by 8.7 centimetres. I'll need white embossing powder, also a Versamark pad and an embossing buddy. I'll keep my little diagram handy up here. First thing I'll do is just pounce all over my watercolour paper with the embossing buddy. Just remove any static or fingerprints before I start. Referring to my diagram, I've marked up the images that will be in the foreground to stamp first. So I'll ink up the floral stamp with Versamark and stamp it twice. And then I'm going to cover those images with white embossing powder. I use a small tray and a little spoon just for ease of applying the powder. Give it a bit of a tap on the back to remove any excess and check there's no stray flakes. Now when you start your heat tool, let it run for a couple of seconds to get nice and hot before you start to heat your powder. Emboss both the flowers and then give them a minute to dry before we apply 2 of those little masks that we created. Orient them so they sit over the top of the 2 flowers perfectly. Pounce with your embossing buddy again, ink the flower up with Versamark and stamp the next 2 flowers according to your diagram. So we're going to put white powder over those again, but we want to remove those masks first. So just be aware of where you've stamped so you're not smudging the image with your fingers as you pull the mask off. Apply powder again. Now because those sticky post-it notes have a little bit of adhesive on the back, there may be some stray flakes in the flowers that we've already embossed. So use a small paintbrush just to rub over the flowers to loosen any little bits of stray embossing powder that may be in those flowers. You don't want to have little white patches in your already embossed flowers when we go to colour them. Tap the excess powder off and again heat the powder with your heat tool. Now just try and be careful to keep the heat tool away from the already embossed flowers, or as much as you possibly can anyway, just so you don't overheat the already embossed flowers. So now we've got 4 flowers and we'll use our masks to cover all of them. Takes a little bit of orienting them sometimes. So again, pounce over the piece of card with your embossing buddy and stamp the next layer of flowers with the Versamark. So following your diagram, so I think we'll do 3 this time, and 1 more. Okay, now it's the same process. We have to remove those masks carefully so that we're not smudging the Versamark we've just stamped. Cover the freshly stamped flowers with the white embossing powder again. Now I try and only get it over the flower, not over the whole piece of card. It can be tricky to see sometimes where you've stamped. So give it a tap on the back, and again, because we've had those sticky masks on, we'll need to check for any stray bits of embossing powder. I generally run my brush over the already embossed flowers and give it a tap to ensure that I'm removing any excess. Again, heat the flowers, and then we're ready to do the very last layer, but we've only got 4 masks, so we'll just pop them on the outside flowers because we're just going to put 2 right on the edge. So there's one last one to go on this side, and it'll be just a small piece of flower peeking out from behind, and then another one over on this side. Again, remove the masks, apply the powder to those last flowers. Remove any stray flecks of embossing powder with your paintbrush and heat the panel as previously. So now you should be left with a watercolour panel of flowers, white embossed, ready for colouring. Today I'm using pumpkin pie, rich razzleberry and lemon lime twist inks. You'll also need some paper towel and an Aqua Painter. I use the finer one out of the set of 2 from Stampin' Up. If you squeeze your ink pad lightly, you'll get a deposit of ink in the lid, which we'll use as a palette. Squeeze your Aqua Painter into the ink to create a pool of watercolour. Pick up some of the pumpkin pie ink in the brush and just apply it to the first flower. Now the raised lines of the embossing contain the watercolour quite well, so it's quite an easy process. I start off quite light and just go around and colour in the whole flower. I don't do the centre bits at this stage, we'll colour those later, so just do the petals. So once I've done the petals all over in the lighter colour, I then go back and just add a little bit of darker colour in certain areas. So continue on with the next flower in the same process. Again, just apply the light colour first within the petals. The embossing holds it for you. And then go back over with a little bit of darker touches here and there. So I've done 4 flowers in the pumpkin pie to start with. And then the next colour we'll use is the rich razzleberry. Now this is a much darker colour, so apply quite a bit of water into the ink and then take the first little bits off onto the paper towel before you apply the ink to the watercolour card, so you don't end up with very dark blobs to start with. So again, just go around and colour in the petals. Try not to go outside the lines of the embossing if you can. Again, go around and apply a little bit of darker colour for texture. And then go ahead and do the same process for all of the rest of the flowers that you're going to do in the rich razzleberry. So obviously I've sped this video up for you. I wish it were this quick in real life. Now I got almost to the end of my rich razzleberry flowers and then realised that inadvertently I'd actually made stripes out of the flowers. So to alleviate that problem a little bit, I've decided to do the very last flower in pumpkin pie. So that's just this little one over on the edge here. Because it's in the background, I've actually made it quite a bit darker than the other ones. So that's my panel. It's still looking a little bit flat, so now I'm going to go back over and start at the beginning again, because that will be the most dry flower, and I'm going to apply some more intense ink colour over the top of the dried watercolouring from previously. If you watercolour over it once it's dry, the darker colour won't blend as much, it'll tend to sit on top and give you the ability to actually add a more intense colour. So I've done that for all of the pumpkin pie flowers before going ahead and doing exactly the same thing for the rich razzleberry flowers. So you can have it a little bit darker this time, seeing as that's what we're doing. I still take the excess off because rich razzleberry is quite a strong colour. So flick around and do all of the colours where they are quite away in the background and there might be some shadow. You can make them a little bit darker, like this little area here. And that just adds a little bit of texture. If you have a look at my close-up photos on the blog, you'll see there's a real watercolour effect. Now for the centres of the flowers, I'm actually using a Stampin' Write marker in rich razzleberry. If you just run the marker over those centre bits, the white embossing will resist and the colour will soak in where there is no embossing. Just means that it's quite dark. If I did it with the watercolour, it probably wouldn't be quite as dark. When you do the orange flowers, the centres in the orange flowers, I did need to be very careful that I didn't spread that ink around into the orange. So I just took a little bit of the very fine tip of a piece of paper towel and just picked that excess colour up off the embossed pieces. And that just creates a slightly darker centre in your flowers for a little bit of contrast. Now most of that ink should be dry, so to remove any excess ink off the white embossing and make it really stand out, take a clean piece of paper towel and just rub lightly across the top. Now we'll need to add our background to the piece, and I'm using Lemon Lime Twist. Now Lemon Lime Twist is quite a strong colour, so if I just applied it directly to my background, I'd have three very bright colours all vying for attention. So I've got a piece of scrap watercolour card. I'm just going to play around with the colours to work out the intensity that I want for my background. You can see the top one's quite intense, the bottom one's much more subtle, and it's the subtle effect that I want. So to help me achieve this, I will pick up some colour and apply it to that scrap of watercolour card till I've removed quite a bit of the ink from the brush, and then start to apply colour directly onto the background. The other inks should be nice and dry, so there shouldn't be any issues with that other colour running. The embossing also helps to stop the two inks mixing. So just keep applying the colour all around the edge, right in close to the flowers. I'm trying to make it just a little bit darker to create a shadow. So you'll need to do both top and bottom. And you're after a very watercolory type effect, so it should be a little bit blotchy with some dark and some lighter colours, but maintaining a reasonably light hue all the way through, just so you're not competing too much with the pumpkin pie and the rich razzleberry. Once you're happy with the colour, you need to just set that aside to dry. You need it to be dry before we start to add that little bit of texture in the background with this patterned stamp from the Oh So Eclectic set and the Lemon Lime Twist ink. You need to put your masks down again because we want that background to appear as if it is in the background. So I'm just using the 4 masks along one side to start with, and then just stamp the texture directly over the masks, with just a little bit peeking out from behind the bottom. Once you've done one side, remove the masks, flip it around, and pop the masks along the other side. Now with this one I've got 5 flowers, but I've only got 4 masks, so I'll do one side first. Same thing, just applying the texture just so a couple of the little images stick out from behind, and then once I get over to this side where I've still got the exposed flower, I'll pick that mask up from one side and move it over to the other side. And all you have to do is remove the masks and you're done. The background panel is finished. So now we're going to work on the greeting piece. The greeting piece is a piece of white vellum. It's 5 centimetres wide, or 5.1 centimetres wide actually, to fit in our banner punch. We'll also need a greeting. I'm using You Are Amazing out of All Things Thanks. So I've popped that on a block, and this is the banner punch. So we're using the widest measurement, which is 5.1 centimetres. Pop that in and just punch the banner shape out of the end. I'm going to emboss the You Are Amazing onto the piece of vellum, and I want it in black. So to make it embossable, I have to also use Versamark and some clear embossing powder. So again, pounce all over with the embossing buddy to remove any static or oil from your fingers. And then firstly ink up the You Are Amazing with the Versamark ink pad. Then quickly tap it onto the black ink pad and straight down onto your vellum. Just adding the Versamark means that it's not going to dry so quickly and going to give you plenty of time to apply that clear embossing powder over the top. It would probably work with just the black ink pad on the vellum because the vellum's non-porous, but I like to use the Versamark. Get your heat tool nice and hot before applying heat to the vellum, just to stop any warping. Be as quick as possible when you're doing your embossing. The Stampin' Up! Vellum is amazing. So this card is a piece of very vanilla thick cardstock, top folding, and the watercoloured panel is going to sit on top. Now there's always the issue of how to apply the vellum, and in this instance I'm actually going to stitch it onto the watercolour panel. So I'll go away and do that stitching and I'll come right back. And thanks to the magic of video, I'm back. The vellum piece is all stitched on. I've tied knots in the back pieces of thread, but I'm going to cut the front ones so that they just hang loose because I like that look. Now we've got an excess piece of vellum on the top of the piece, so I will just trim that off with my scissors. And that's ready to go on the front of the card. I'll use some multi-purpose liquid glue to adhere my vellum. You could also use fast fuse, which is really good for holding stronger pieces of card like watercolour paper onto your card front. But as long as you apply lots of the liquid glue, the watercolour paper will stick fine. And it also gives you a little bit of wriggle room to get it nicely centered on the card. Just make sure that's stuck down really well, especially around the edges. And that's our finished card. I hope you've enjoyed my video tutorial today. If you'd like to see more photos of this card, pop on over to my blog at www.senseofwhimsy.com.au. Don't forget that links to the other design team members' videos are included in the video description below. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.